Hello, everybody. Stephen Mead here. We're kind of in a little bit of an unusual venue for this week's update. I'm actually staying in San Francisco this weekend for a wedding, and there's this kind of lovely courtyard at the hotel. So I thought I would, go ahead and do the video from the courtyard, so you guys are seeing a little bit of a change of scenery. But really, I think that the big news is if you look at the headline, this isn't clickbait. I'm going to walk you through the data. We did see a massive price crash in entry-level condos. Also, just as a reminder, my name is Stephen Mead with Domicile Real Estate, where we are on a mission to help California's renters become homeowners. This is our entry-level home buyer market update. So where we take our stats and we really kind of look towards that entry level of the market. So I don't want to waste any time. I want to get right into this. And I think this is a great time to have a conversation about median home price data and kind of some of the follies of median home price data. So let's go ahead and jump into this here. So let me get us back to the beginning here. All right, closed prices. Again, just remember that this is based on 4 to 6 weeks ago. So that's the number one thing to look at. And obviously I'm going to talk a little bit about our entry-level single-family home here. We see that we had data that kind of rose up and then it's kind of crested out as we head here into the beginning of August. Obviously, the big thing is right down here that we're going to talk about. And our median price data for our entry-level condo moved from 545,000 down to 460,000. Why does that make a big difference for you? And what does this actually mean? I think this is a better discussion. So I'm going to tell you a couple of the things that this could mean because I think it's important. So number one, this could mean exactly what it is at face value. And that is that prices, in fact, dropped nearly 20% in 1 week. I don't think that's true. So we're gonna go ahead and just cross that off our list of possibilities. If you look back here in the data, you do see we've had some weeks where we've had some pretty significant changes of $40,000, week to week here. And in fact, if you go 2 weeks, it was a $50,000 drop. But I want to talk about this for a second and talk about one of the dangers in using median price data, right? And I'm going to talk about the danger of that real quick and move off screen share. So one of the problems with median price data is that it doesn't necessarily, what people assume that it tells you is that it tells you where home prices are. And it gives some indications of that, but that's not actually what it's measuring. And this is one of those times where it's really important to understand the data behind this. I'm going to give you a really good example. Let's pretend that our market consists of an expensive neighborhood and a low price neighborhood, right? So like a high price neighborhood and a low price neighborhood. And every single week, we generally see 10 houses sell, 5 of them in the high price neighborhood and 5 of them in the low price neighborhood, right? And we see that relationship throughout time. And let's suppose all the high price homes sell for $1 million, right? And all the low priced homes sell for $100,000. I'm doing this to keep the math easy in my head, right? That would give us a median price of $550,000, or technically if we had one in the middle, right? It would end up between those 2 data points. The problem is what happens if 1 week, for example, you have 7 in the expensive neighborhood sell and only 3 and only 3 sell in the lower price neighborhood, right? And what that does is that actually shifts your median over significantly. So a median only works when you assume the same product mix is selling week to week. And one of the things that's going on right now that I think is really important to understand is inventory is not the same across the market. It's not homogenous. What I mean by that is because inventories are the same, I think we're seeing some shifting of the sales numbers, right? So we're going to go back into this and I'm going to talk about a couple of other effects that I think might be happening. And just for the record, whenever we see data like this, I double check her math. I go back through there because I want to make sure that we're not making some kind of a mistake, right, in our data that's resulted in this lower thing. We've checked these numbers 3 times. this information is accurate. So I think what we've got is really a combination of things happening this week. Number one, I think we do have some natural variation week to week. We've seen some pretty big swings week to week. Before, we had a $40,000 swing back here in April. So I think that might explain part of this. I think the other thing, that we might be seeing going on with this data is that we might be seeing a little bit of a shift of product mix. Areas that maybe are less expensive might have more inventory. They have been recording more sales, and thus, because of that, it is shifting that median price level data. And that's really one of the reasons why I like median data, and you'll hear me talk about this all the time, that I like looking at the trend. I think the trend is where your data is when you're looking at this median home price data. It's not in looking at the week-to-week variations, because these week-to-week variations are subject to kind of a lot of sort of minor effects that can throw this data off. And I think that is what we're seeing in this week. So, moving on to that, I kind of want to talk a little bit about payments. If you take this data at face value, our median payment level dropped to $2,800, or less than it was in 2018. My reality check says that that is not a true picture of the market, and I bet we will see some kind of a rebound in this pricing data next week. I think the good news is if we come over here to our single family data, we're seeing just over $4,000. That is still well below our peak of $4,158 by probably about $100. A lot of this is being driven by these rates that are a little bit lower. We saw just again a minor weakening of mortgage rates again this week. And just for fun, we talked about what household income do you need. If you do go by again that face value week to week, the amount of income you need is dropped by $12,000. Again, like I said, I think we've got a couple of compounding effects here sort of producing kind of this drop. And I think we're going to see a bit of a rebound next week. Now, if we see a couple weeks in a row where this drops, well, I think then we'll have something else to talk about, because the data is telling us something else. Finally, I want to talk about absorption rate, right? And I think absorption rate is really important to follow, because that really is giving you a bit of a snapshot of what's happening week to week in our exact market, in that relationship of buyers and sellers, right? Do we see that these markets are in balance? And if you look here, we're seeing again an 87% on our entry-level single-family home and an 82% on our condo. These are strong numbers. These are in very strong seller market territory. I would still characterize that if you are a seller, you hold the upper hand. Maybe not quite to the same circus level we saw earlier in the spring, back in February and parts of March, but still a very strong position. And if you're a buyer, things are better than they were, but they're not as good as they were last year in terms of competition. Now, this is the one that, again, I think is really some positive news for you. If you're an entry-level single-family buyer, you see we kind of have this new normal of inventory. And that new normal inventory looks a lot like inventory last fall. I think you actually have choices in the market. Condos have still not recovered to this, which is, again, the reason why I think this blip in pricing is exactly that, a blip in pricing. I think if we saw this inventory jump to the moon, well, I think that would tell really a different story of the data. And that's why we run multiple data sets like this, because we're trying to tell a story with the data. And the more information that we have that either corroborates or refutes a piece of data that looks unusual, that really helps us understand what's actually going on. Now, this is, again, a little bit of a market stat that we use to gauge competition level. And in this case, higher means less competition. So it means more properties are left available, and there's less fighting over over fewer number of properties. And you see these numbers really bottomed out here around April, and then have kind of been on a little bit of a steady climb with some variations ever since. Finally, I want to talk about our overall levels of inventory. If you look here, and I think it's important to reference this stuff historically, we're at 3.65% weeks of inventory for our single family homes and trailer. If we look where we were last fall, we were right around that same number. And I really think that I think if you're a person out there and you're facing the market, I think this is the best news that you can have, is that this is certainly by no means an easy market, but to sort of rewind a little bit back to the fall like that in terms of your level of choice and level of inventory, I think that's a pretty good place to be. Now, the real interesting story here again is the condos. And this is the reason why I'm convinced that this pricing data is a blip. We saw this number weaken a little bit for weak supply of homes and condos in our Los Angeles and Orange County markets. Look where we were last fall. We were back in this kind of almost 7-8 weeks. Gosh, even towards the fall, we hit 9 weeks of inventory, and we're kind of stuck in this number in the fives. It's a little bit better than it was, but boy, I feel like this is a new normal for that condo market. You know, we mentioned a couple times, you know, when COVID began, people just didn't want to live in a shared environment. It just wasn't something they were interested in. So, you know, I think that's really reversed. We've really seen that reverse. And I think that, you know, the condo market is a force to be reckoned with. I'm very excited to see that pricing data in the next week. We'll kind of see what happens. And as always, you know, if you guys like what we're doing, don't forget, you do want to like, subscribe on that. Definitely hit that notification bell. These things do matter. We love the comments. Keep those comments going. Once again, kind of out here, sort of shooting on location in one of those difficult housing markets in all of California, up here in the Bay Area. But keep those questions and comments coming. And obviously, if you're in the need of any services or anything, definitely give us a shout out either here on Facebook, YouTube. You can write a comment. Lots of ways to get in touch with us, and we're happy to help. We'll talk with you real soon.